This is the only weight I've got left to carry. Thanksgiving was meant to bring peace. But as I sat at the end of our crowded table, watching my wife Cassandra giggle with her friend Harriet, I felt no thanks at all. The house carried the scent of roasted turkey and sweet apple pie, mixed with the soft clatter of glasses and voices from family and guests. The table was trimmed with golden leaves, flickering candles casting warm light, a picture of comfort. Then Cassandra spoke. "Nothing to be thankful for in bed," she shouted, loud enough for everyone to catch it. Harriet nearly spilled her wine before breaking into wild laughter. The others froze for a moment, their silence heavier than words, until Adam, her brother, cleared his throat in discomfort. Cassandra smirked, thrilled with her joke at my cost. I had learned to live with her barbs the way she loved making me her target in front of others. But this time was sharper. This wasn't a careless slip in private, the kind I could ignore. No, she wanted an audience. She wanted the show. And the sting was knowing everyone's eyes were waiting to see my reaction. I set my glass down slow, my jaw tight, fingers pressing against the stem. I forced out a thin smirk that didn't reach my eyes, the mask I had practiced to keep calm and avoid messy fights in front of company. But inside I was burning. The table's laughter came soft and strained, unsure if it was safe to join in. Harriet nudged her playfully. "Come on, Cass. Cut him some slack. Maybe it's just a rough season." More chuckles, more glances, more weight pressing against my chest. My fists curled beneath the table where no one could see. I told myself to let it go like always. Nod, smile, pretend it didn't cut, pretend it wasn't another in a long line of cheap jabs she loved throwing at me. But something in me snapped. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't pound the table or demand an apology. That wasn't me. Instead, I lifted my glass, sipped, and locked my eyes on hers. Cassandra's grin faltered. She had expected me to laugh, to shrug, to slip into the role of the weak husband she'd shaped me into. But I didn't. I let the silence breathe between us, my gaze steady, my smirk firm. And in that pause I made my choice. I wasn't letting this pass. Not tonight. The rest of the meal I stayed quiet. Adam rambled about football. I nodded along, even forced a weak laugh at one of his dull jokes. But my mind stayed on Cassandra's words, replaying her tone, her smug grin, the way she soaked in the laughter that followed. I caught myself watching her through the night, seeing her laugh and drink as if nothing had happened, while a storm churned inside me. She thought it was just another jab, another careless line that would vanish like all the rest. But she was wrong. When dessert was served, I barely touched my plate. Harriet kept cracking jokes. Cassandra sipped her wine, and the rest of the table pretended not to notice the shift in my mood. Maybe they thought I was simply tired. Maybe they assumed I'd laugh it off like I always did. But I wasn't tired. I was done. When the last dishes were cleared and guests began leaving, I stood near the door, thanking them for coming. Cassandra was still lively, hugging Harriet and laughing as if the night had been perfect. Adam clapped my shoulder before he left, his expression hard to read, but his tone quiet. He knew something was wrong even if he didn't know the whole story. "See you later, man," he said. I gave him a thin smile. When the house finally emptied, Cassandra stretched with a sigh of satisfaction. That went well. Harriet was hilarious tonight. I didn't respond. I walked into the dining room and began stacking plates. My movements were slow, deliberate, my head full. She had no idea that tonight had changed something, that I was finished playing along. The house was heavy now, the silence broken only by the hum of the dishwasher and the faint hiss of dying candles. I carried plates into the kitchen, moving carefully, holding myself steady, even as anger stirred beneath my skin. Across the room, Cassandra hummed while wiping down the counters, looking proud of herself like she had just put on a flawless show. Her words echoed in my mind. Nothing to be thankful for in bed, tossed out so casually with no thought at all, like I was nothing. Harriet's burst of laughter had made it sting even more. And now Cassandra carried on humming, smiling as if she hadn't cut me down in front of everyone. I drew a slow breath, weighing how to handle it. I wasn't the kind of man who shouted or slammed doors. I avoided messy fights and pointless drama. But tonight was different. The way she had laughed at me with no regard for how it landed flipped a switch inside me. For the first time in years, I couldn't just let it pass. I set a plate down with more force than I meant to. The sharp clatter finally made Cassandra glance up in surprise. "You okay?" she asked. I turned slowly, resting my hands on the sink. "Do you even realize what you said tonight?" Her brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "At dinner," I said, keeping my voice firm. "That comment about having nothing to be thankful for in bed." She rolled her eyes and gave a short laugh. "Oh, come on, Mark. It was just a joke." There it was again. The same dismissive tone, the same brush off. My feelings treated like nothing more than an inconvenience. I let out a slow breath. A joke at my expense. In front of the entire family. She sighed, crossing her arms, already looking bored. Look, you're being way too sensitive. It wasn't that serious. I studied her face, the complete ease with which she brushed it aside. You do this a lot, Cass? I said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. Do what exactly? Turn me into the punchline of your little comedy routines. Cassandra groaned, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling. Oh my God, Mark. Seriously? People laughed. It's not a big deal. I didn't look away from her. It is a big deal to me. That actually made her pause. Not because she suddenly understood the damage she'd done, but because she hadn't expected me to push back. Normally, I'd drop it by now, shake my head, tell myself it wasn't worth the argument, and let her get away with it. Not tonight. She let out an exasperated sigh. Look, I didn't mean anything by it, okay? Harriet and I were just messing around. You know how we get when we've had a little wine. I tilted my head slightly, watching her. Yeah, I do know. I saw the flicker of annoyance cross her face. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know exactly how you are. My voice was level, but there was a cold edge cutting through it now. I know how much you love getting a quick laugh out of everyone at my expense. You drop these little nasty digs in front of an audience because you think it's funny. Because you think I won't say anything and that it doesn't matter. I exhaled slowly, letting the heat go. But it does matter, Cassandra. It matters to me. She stared at me for a long moment, completely silent. Then, instead of owning up to any of it, she scoffed. God, you are really blowing this whole thing out of proportion. I nodded slowly. Right. Of course I am. Because that was always her reaction. Every single time. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, already preparing to rewrite the narrative and make me the problem. She was going to twist this into me being insecure, me not being able to take a joke, me ruining a perfectly good Thanksgiving over nothing. But she wasn't going to win this one. Not this time. I pushed off the counter and turned back to load the dishwasher. I wasn't going to stand here and argue with her. I wasn't going to exhaust myself explaining basic respect to my own wife anymore. And that sudden silence was exactly what made her nervous. She absolutely hated it when I stopped reacting, when I shut down instead of playing into her toxic little back-and-forth games. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, her eyes narrowing as she watched me. Oh, come on. Don't do that. Don't do that thing where you act all broody and play the silent victim. Just say whatever it is you need to say. I didn't even turn around to look at her. I already did. Silence stretched thick and heavy between us. She stood there, waiting for me to crack, waiting for me to roll my eyes, mutter an apology and move on like a good husband. But I stayed completely still. Instead of giving her what she wanted, I wiped my hands on a towel and walked out of the kitchen. Mark, she called after me, her voice rising in frustration. I didn't stop. I wasn't interested in another pointless argument where she played the exact same tired game. I wasn't interested in another night of pretending everything was completely fine when it was completely broken. As I walked up the stairs, a strange, powerful sense of clarity settled over me. I wasn't just angry. I was completely done. I didn't know what the next step looked like yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I was never going to let Cassandra dictate my worth anymore. I was done letting her belittle me and call it humor. If she couldn't respect me, then it was time I started respecting myself. As I closed the bedroom door behind me, I felt something massive shift deep in my chest. For the first time in a very long time, I actually felt in control. The house was still dark when I woke up at 5:12 a.m. The kind of time where everything outside felt untouched, waiting. Cassandra was still asleep beside me, her breath slow and even. I stared at the ceiling, my mind replaying the night before. The sharp edge of her words still lingered in my chest, but something was different this time. I wasn't just angry, I was motivated. I slipped out of bed carefully, not bothering to turn on the light. I moved through the familiar darkness of our bedroom, pulling on sweatpants and an old hoodie. Normally, I'd start my morning the same way, groggy, scrolling through my phone, sipping coffee, and letting the day roll over me like I was a passenger in my own life. But not today. Today I had a plan. I grabbed my car keys and stepped outside, the early morning chill biting at my skin. The sky was still ink black, the streets empty except for a few porch lights flickering in the distance. It had been years since I'd done this. Left the house before sunrise with an actual purpose. 15 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour gym I hadn't stepped foot in for years. The neon sign buzzed faintly in the cold air. I used to come here all the time back when I felt like me. Back when I had control over my own life. Somewhere along the way I'd let that slip. Let myself fall into a pattern of just existing instead of living. I wasn't going to be that guy anymore. The gym was nearly empty, save for a few dedicated early risers. The scent of rubber mats and faint disinfectant filled the air. The moment I stepped inside, I felt something shift in me. An old memory waking up. I used to love this. The challenge, the discipline, the feeling of pushing myself past limits. I approached the front desk where a guy in his early 20s barely looked up from his phone. "You a member?" he asked. "I used to be," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Minutes later, I was holding a fresh membership card, and for the first time in years, I actually felt in control of something. I started slow on the treadmill, easing myself into the rhythm of my own footsteps. The belt hummed beneath me as I pushed forward, my lungs burning with the reminder that I hadn't done this in a long time. But with each step, I felt something old and familiar returning. The version of myself I'd lost along the way. After the treadmill, I moved to the weights. My muscles trembled as I gripped the dumbbells. The weight heavier than I remembered, but I pushed through it. Every rep felt like I was reclaiming a part of myself Cassandra had chipped away over the years. I wasn't thinking about her anymore. I was thinking about me. Halfway through my workout, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Mark." I turned, sweat dripping down my temple, and saw Troy standing near the benches. Troy and I used to work together years ago before he switched jobs. He'd always been one of those guys who stayed disciplined, fit, motivated, and looking at him now, I could tell he hadn't let himself slip like I had. "Man, it's been a while," he said, clapping me on the back. I nodded, catching my breath. "Yeah. Just trying to get back into the groove." Troy smirked, looking me up and down. "Good for you. Honestly, you look like you needed this." I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. "Man, you have no absolute idea." We fell into conversation easily. He asked about work. I asked about his family. And somehow the conversation veered toward the real reason I was here. "What's the word at home? She still got you on that tight leash?" he asked, only half joking. I exhaled a heavy breath, rubbing the back of my neck. "Not for long, Troy. Not anymore." His eyebrows lifted slightly, his smile fading. "Damn. That bad?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stared at the heavy iron barbell in front of me, feeling the suffocating weight of everything Cassandra had said over the years, every little humiliation she'd put me through. Finally, I met his eyes. I let myself completely disappear in my own marriage, man. And I'm done doing that. Troy studied me for a solid moment before giving a firm nod. "Good. Then stop talking about it and go do something about it." I grinned, feeling a spark I hadn't felt in a decade. That's exactly the plan. By the time I finished my workout, my muscles ached in a way I hadn't felt in years. It was a good ache, the kind that reminded me I was alive, that I was capable of something more. I drove home just as the sun was rising, a golden glow stretching across the sky. The house was still quiet when I stepped inside. Cassandra wasn't up yet. Good. I took a long shower, letting the water wash away the sweat, the exhaustion, the old version of myself I was leaving behind. When I stepped out, I didn't feel drained. I felt recharged for the first time in a long time. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone I recognized, someone I was proud of. By the time Cassandra finally woke up, I was already dressed, sipping coffee at the kitchen counter. She walked in, still groggy, stretching as she grabbed a mug. She glanced at me, her brow furrowing slightly. "You're up early," she said. I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Yeah." She eyed my gym bag, the slight sheen of sweat still on my skin. "Did you go somewhere?" I met her gaze, taking my time before answering. "Yeah," I said simply. "I did." She waited, expecting me to elaborate, to explain myself like I always did, but I didn't. I just took another sip of coffee and picked up my phone, scrolling through emails. Cassandra frowned but didn't press it. "Not yet." But I saw the wheels turning in her head. She was used to being the one in control, dictating the tone of our conversations, our lives. She wasn't going to like this new version of me. And honestly, I didn't care, because for the first time in years, I wasn't living for Cassandra. I was living for me. At work that day, I felt different, lighter in a way. Not physically, my muscles still burned from the workout, reminding me how far I had to go. But mentally, it was like a switch had flipped inside me. For years, I'd moved through my days on autopilot, just existing, waiting for the next sarcastic remark, the next eye roll, the next moment where Cassandra reminded me that I wasn't enough. But not today. Today I had a plan. My coworker Jake leaned against my desk with a knowing smirk. "Hey man, you look different today," he said. I glanced up, raising an eyebrow. Different how? I don't know, you just look more awake. More alive, he shrugged, leaning in a bit closer. I didn't see you at the lunch spot yesterday, so I just figured you were buried under whatever never-ending weekend to-do list Cassandra left for you. I shook my head and gave him a calm smile. Nah, I had some other things to take care of. Jake chuckled, adjusting his glasses. Well, look at that. You almost sound like a man who actually has a life outside of his wife. Maybe I finally am, I said. This pattern continued over the following weeks. I'd work out religiously, come home later than usual, not ridiculously late, just late enough to get under her skin. Late enough that I didn't text updates about where I was or when I'd be home. I met up with guys from the gym for drinks, something I hadn't done in years. It wasn't about the drinks or company. It was about reclaiming my time, my choices, my independence. And Cassandra hated it. She'd be waiting when I got home, pretending she wasn't, scrolling through her phone, but clearly itching for confrontation. When she'd ask where I'd been, I'd simply say, out. When she'd press for details, I'd shrug and say, I grabbed drinks with guys from the gym. She hated that answer, not because she actually cared where I was, but because I hadn't felt the need to run it by her first. One evening, she was waiting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine when I got home, her expression unreadable. What's up? I asked, setting my keys down. She swirled her wine, staring at the glass. You tell me, Mark. You've been acting completely different lately. And it's incredibly sudden. I looked at her, totally unfazed. Maybe it's not as sudden as you think. Maybe you just never noticed before because you didn't care enough to actually look. As the weeks went on, our little confrontations only grew more intense. She was getting visibly frustrated. What the hell is going on with you, Mark? She snapped one night. You're acting like a completely different person. You barely even talk to me anymore. I leaned back against the wall. Isn't that exactly what you wanted, though? She blinked, caught off guard. What are you talking about? Come on, Cass. You've spent years making me the literal punchline of every conversation you have. You treat me like a total joke in front of your friends, your family, anyone who will listen. She instantly slammed her glass down, getting defensive. That is completely unfair. It was a joke, Mark. Oh, really? I challenged her, taking a step forward. Let me ask you something. If I had stood up at that Thanksgiving table, looked at everyone we know, and made a humiliating comment like that about you and our private life, how exactly would you have reacted? Silence. Complete and utter silence. She knew exactly how she would have reacted. She would have been absolutely furious. She would have been livid, demanded a massive public apology, and stewed in pure resentment for weeks. But because it was me, I was just supposed to swallow my pride and accept that it was a joke. I have a massive problem with the way you treat me, Cassandra, I said, my voice dead calm. I hate the way you talk down to me when other people are around. And the only reason you even give a damn right now is because you can feel yourself losing total control over me. She tried to open her mouth to argue, but I cut her off right there, looking her dead in the eyes to deliver the truth that had been building up inside me for a decade. I was never your husband, Cass. I was just your favorite punchline. The words landed like a physical slap to her face. Her face went completely pale, her lips parting slightly as if she wanted to scream or cry, but absolutely nothing came out. What could she even say? I'd spent years brushing off her jabs, swallowing my pride, telling myself it wasn't worth fighting over. But the truth was I'd been miserable. And the moment I stopped catering to her, the moment I stopped playing along, she started to panic because deep down she knew she'd pushed me too far. She just never thought I'd actually do something about it. I grabbed my gym bag from the floor, slinging it over my shoulder. She looked up, her voice trembling slightly. Where are you going now? I looked at her one last time before heading for the door. Out again. Mark, stop, you can't just keep walking out. Watch me, I said and closed the door behind me. I spent the night over at Troy's place. We sat out on his deck and I finally admitted out loud what I had been hiding from myself for years. I told him I'd been emotionally checked out of that marriage for a long time, but I was just too terrified to admit it to myself. When I finally went back to the house late the next evening, Cassandra was sitting at the exact same spot at the kitchen table. There was an open bottle of wine, but her glass was empty. For the first time in our entire marriage, she looked genuinely nervous. Really nervous. We finally had the real conversation we should have had years ago. I looked across the table at her and didn't see the terrifying, dominant woman who used to control my life. I just saw a woman who had spent years belittling her husband to make herself feel bigger, laughing at his expense, and dismissing his feelings whenever he tried to speak up. And now she only cared because she could feel me slipping away for good. "Let me ask you a serious question, Cass," I said quietly. "Would you even be sitting here right now if I hadn't started changing? If I hadn't started pulling away, would you still be sitting at lunch with Harriet, laughing about what a joke your husband is?" A long, suffocating silence filled the room. She stared down at her hands, unable to look me in the eye. She had no answer because she knew the absolute truth. "I don't hate you," I told her, my voice soft but entirely final. "But I am completely done living like a ghost in my own house." She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. "So, that's it then? We're just over?" "Yeah," I said. "We are." She stood up abruptly. "Fine." She turned and walked upstairs, but as she went, I saw the sheer panic in her eyes. Over the following weeks, the shift in our house was almost tangible, like a sudden drop in temperature. Cassandra tried absolutely everything to fix it. She cooked my favorite meals, she lit candles in the evening, she tried acting like everything was completely normal. She even seemed genuinely terrified of losing me for the first time in her life. But it was far too late. The love I had once felt for her hadn't died overnight. It had been slowly worn down to dust by years of being dismissed, humiliated, and overlooked. I'd spent so much time trying to single-handedly save our marriage that I hadn't realized just how entirely one-sided that effort had been. She would watch me constantly now. She watched me come home from the gym, watched me take work calls with a level of confidence and authority I hadn't possessed in a decade. As I stopped orbiting her world and started building a vibrant, independent one of my own, I could see the profound regret in her eyes. She finally realized that she had let me slip right through her fingers, and now, no matter what she did, it was too late to drag me back. Finally, on a quiet Saturday morning, while she sat staring blankly into her coffee cup, I sat down opposite her. "Cassandra, I think we need to separate." Her head snapped up so fast I thought she might get whiplash. Her eyes widened, all the color draining from her face instantly. She immediately tried to downplay it, scrambling for excuses. "Mark, please, we're just having a rough patch. It's just a few arguments. Are you really going to throw our whole life away over that one stupid Thanksgiving comment?" I shook my head, feeling nothing but a calm sadness. "This isn't about that one comment, Cass. And it's not about the arguments. This is about years of deep disrespect that you have never once acknowledged." She looked at me, her defensive walls trying to slide back up. "And what about me? What about everything I've had to endure in this marriage? I'm the one who's suffering here." I just sat there waiting. "Go ahead," I said gently. "Tell me, what exactly did you endure?" She opened her mouth to speak, but she hesitated. She sat there for a long, agonizing moment, her lips trembling, because she realized she didn't have a single real answer. Not one that would erase the fact that I was the one who had been consistently disrespected, dismissed, and treated like a joke for years. She looked down at the table, her shoulders slumping. Is there anything I could have done differently, Mark?" I looked at her one last time. "You could have listened a long time ago," I said. 2 weeks later, I signed the lease for my very own apartment. It wasn't huge and it wasn't fancy, but it was entirely mine. The night before I officially moved out, she stood leaning against the frame of our bedroom doorway, watching me pack the last of my things. "Is this really how it ends?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I zipped up my bag. "Yeah, Cass, it is." She wiped a tear from her cheek. "I never ever thought it would end like this." I hoisted the bag over my shoulder and looked around the room one last time. To be honest, neither did I. Then I walked past her, stepped out of the bedroom, and walked down the stairs without looking back a single time. The weak, beaten-down version of me who would have stayed, who would have kept tolerating her toxic treatment, who would have happily continued being her favorite punchline, he didn't exist anymore. For the first time in years, I finally felt free. This story shows how a single moment can break years of silence and completely change a man's life. What do you think about Mark's choice to finally walk away? Was he right to separate after years of disrespect? Or do you think Cassandra deserved a second chance to fix things? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.